I am Madison Timmons.
I'm Chris Susi.
And we're paranormal specialists who live in the most haunted city on earth, Savannah, Georgia. Every day is Halloween in our line of work, so join us as we spin true tales of haunts, murders, and disturbing Savannah history. I'm Madison.
I'm Chris.
And welcome to the most haunted city on earth. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the most haunted city on earth. My name is Madison Timmons.
I'm Chris Susi.
And today we are going to talk about Miss Lizzie Borden. Woo.
Lizzie.
Yes. The spirit that everybody likes to say, they're like, wasn't Lizzie Borden from here when they come to Savannah? And I'm like,
Well,
nope.
And it's funny because if you ask me, the Gribble House murders are far more grotesque and intriguing than the Lizzie Borden murders. But Lizzie Borden was a sensation. Yeah. She was an instant celebrity. I mean, this before social media. Everyone was talking about her across the country, probably around the world.
Absolutely. But it's funny. It's like when you come up to people and you're like, do you know who Lizzie Borden is? They're like, yeah, that was the girl who killed her parents, right? But then you ask them, like, do you know what the Gribble House is? And they're like, what?
Right.
It's like,
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, one's still standing and one isn't, though.
Yeah, but listen.
You gotta give it that.
But the Gribble House is just like, it is. It's a horrific story.
And it's an axe murder.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, why is one axe murder more, significant than the other axe murder? And one of the interesting things about it was there was this amazing trial around the Lizzie Borden murder. She was arrested and she was tried and she was acquitted. Although it's very tough to argue that it wasn't her. All the evidence suggests it was her. Everything points to her. Her alibi was, I was in the house. That's literally her alibi. Her alibi was, I was ironing handkerchiefs while my stepmother was being killed, and I was possibly in the barn, maybe in the basement, maybe upstairs, when my father was murdered. These, it's really bizarre, but I'll go ahead and get you up to date to what goes on. I stayed the night at the Lizzie Borden house. It is now a bed and breakfast, if you can imagine that.
Yes.
You can actually stay in the room where Lizzie Borden's stepmother was hacked to death with a hatchet. You can stay in that room. We did not stay in that room. We were actually in a very creepy room in the attic. Like, literally, the wall was slanted at us. It was very creepy. And to make matters worse, they put a toy box full of old toys in the room, which just makes the whole thing worse. You're in this tiny little room, and you're looking across the way, and it's like, oh, look, a toy box. Why?
I'm sure Megan loved that.
Oh, yeah. No. It was insane, and it was an insane encounter. If you have an opportunity to do it, I strongly suggest, even if you don't stay the night, they do offer this ghost hunt tour that you can go on, and it was one of the more significant ghost hunts I've ever been on in my entire life. But fascinatingly enough, the history of Lizzie Borden was brought into very sharp focus because I thought I knew. What you're supposed to know about Lizzie Borden. It boils down to a nursery rhyme. It wasn't a nursery rhyme. It's more like a chant. Kind of like the Freddy Krueger chant. Yeah. Kids used to sing this to Lizzie Borden. Now imagine you're a kid and Lizzie Borden, who you believe is an axe murderer, is living, down the street from you. You go to her house. You stand on her lawn and you say, Lizzie Borden had an axe, gave her mother 40 whacks. When she saw what she's done, she gave her father 41. This was an axe murderer. You think this person's an axe murderer, and you're taunting her. You're on her lawn. And so it was very bizarre. The whole story is strange. Basically, the story goes one crisp morning in 1892, I believe. I could be wrong about the date. I believe it's 1892. In 1892, Lizzie Borden's father, Andrew, and her mother, Abby, or stepmother, Abby, were brutally murdered. Now, they were not hit 40 times and 41 times. Abby was hit 19 times with a hatchet. And the father was hit 10 or 11 times and the father took it to the face.
Ooh.
And it was gruesome. It was gory. It was horrible. The scene was terrible. And if you go to the Lizzie Borden house, they have the crime scene photos on display. So you can sit and look at what is very undiscernible as a human being, because there's only a few hits to the face with an axe before you no longer look like a person. And the stepmother was actually hit in the back of the head first. And so she's got all kinds of cave. And they have replicas of their skulls there. So you like, and in the dining room where the bed and breakfast, the breakfast part, you're sitting in the dining room and you look over and there are two caved in skulls just like at the end of the table. And you're like, oh, good. Pancakes and skull fragments. So, yeah, it's very bizarre. And so, of course, when the police arrive, there were two people on the property the entire time. Lizzie Borden was on the property the entire time, and so was the maid, Bridget. And Bridget
did it.
You would think.
Yeah.
It makes perfect sense. And to make matters worse, Bridget was a replacement maid. They had another maid named Maggie. When Bridget came on, Lizzie Borden and her sister Emma refused to call Bridget by her name. They just called her Maggie. They just continued to call her Maggie. That's how little respect they showed this woman.
Goodness.
But Bridget had the same kind of story. She was she had all these tasks that she had to do during the day, wash the windows and go in, and she wasn't feeling well. And so she tells the story consistently every time she is interviewed.
Okay.
She tells it. Lizzie Borden, on the other hand, cannot keep a straight story. Mm-hmm. She tells many versions where she is in different places. She tells things that are entirely contradictory. Her story goes all over the place. One of her main things was that when her father came home, she took his boots off before he took a nap on the couch. This is her interaction with her father. But in the crime scene photos, he's wearing his boots. And so there's all kinds of inconsistencies, all kinds of strangeness. But it's worth noting that because she was in close proximity to the graphic and horrible death of her father and her stepmother, she was placed on morphine, copious amounts of morphine to calm her nerves. And I will tell you right now, morphine will calm your nerves.
Yes, it will.
If you need some nerves calming, morphine will do the trip. And people were like, well, maybe that's why her stories were inconsistent. And it's like, maybe. But grossly inconsistent stories are bizarre when it would make more sense to just not remember. Why would she remember so many different details versus just not knowing? Just being like, morphine brain.
Exactly.
Which is an excellent defense. So her story was very suspicious. And when all was said and done, she went to court, she went to trial. She never showed any remorse. She never showed any sorrow, no grieving. And she had a habit of overdressing because the truth of the matter was her father was actually very wealthy.
Sure.
But he was very stingy. And being stingy was the bane of Lizzie Borden's life. Lizzie Borden wanted desperately to be a part of society and be a part of the... she wanted more than anything to live on the hill, which is where all the rich people and the debutantes and everybody lived. Mm-hmm. They lived right down in the thick of it, right on 2nd Street. And they're
in the holler.
Yeah, in the holler. And and the father refused to get indoor plumbing. He refused to upgrade anything. He was very much a stingy man, which sounds like a motive to me. Mm-hmm. Because Lizzie Borden basically got what is equivalent to like $10 million in today's money.
Wow. From
the death of her stepmother and her father. So, and there was huge disputes. Liz Borden had a falling out with her stepmother over money, and it was. There's a lot of evidence pointing against her. She goes on trial. She shows up in spectacular dress, not mourning attire. She's very
like,
comical.
attention.
She's like, look at me.
I'm a celebrity.
Right, exactly. She was a celebrity. She was. They sent people from the New York Times up to sit in the courtroom. It was a
she's loving
media
it.
circus.
Loving it. It's like Ted Bundy.
A narcissist.
Yeah, absolutely. So you watch this whole thing play out and you're like, she's guilty. Oh, that's a guilty person. And the jury, made up of all men, all older farmer men from, the region. They looked at her and were like, well, no little woman could ever do that. That requires a level.
What is this?
This is me. I'm putting my hand in my waistcoat.
Oh, okay.
Yes, in your pocket.
In my little pocket here.
Yes.
No. Oh, I'm sorry. They're New Englander. No woman can do that. Surely there was somewhere there couldn't be happening. Anyway,
Sure.
They basically, her defense was she's girly. No girl can do that. That requires man. That's man force right there. So they literally acquitted her because they felt that she didn't have the constitution to pull off this specific crime. The nature and the ferocity of this crime. It was like, no, women would poison. They certainly wouldn't use an axe. They wouldn't
Tell that to Elizabeth Bathory.
Well, the interesting
They
thing
don't know
was
about her.
they state that a woman would poison rather than hatch it.
Sure.
Turns out Lizzie Borden tried to buy cyanide the day before the murders. She went to the pharmacy to buy cyanide, and she was refused. Okay. And then it turns out that her whole family was sick. Her father and her mother were both feeling ill for weeks.
Uh-oh.
Which suggests maybe, and the stepmother went to the doctor saying she had been poisoned.
Yeah.
But the doctor's like, I don't see any signs of that. Modern science hadn't caught up. So
Yeah.
it's very possible that she was poisoning them and it just wasn't working fast enough.
Wow.
And she just got fed up and one day just went hatchet crazy. So that was the breadth of it. She got the money. She bought a house on the hill. She didn't move out of town, a town that believed she was an axe murderer. She went to go live up on the hill, and she threw lavish parties and lived the life of, a celebrity, a wealthy person. She insisted on becoming Lizbeth instead of Lizzie because Lizzie was an axe murderer, but Lizbeth was, this fine, refined woman living on the hill. And so I kind of knew that story. That story was the story I knew.
Yeah.
I knew that she went on trial. I knew she was acquitted, and I knew more than likely she did it. What I didn't know was, one, there was another suspect. There was another good, solid suspect. The day before the axe murders happened, Lizzie's maternal uncle, that would be Lizzie's mother who passed, uncle, came to the house and asked to stay the night. He stayed the night before the murder, out of the blue.
Huh.
And he slept in the room that Abby was murdered in. Now, he had an ironclad alibi, but it was a suspiciously concise and very well-rehearsed alibi where he knew every street he turned on, every person he spoke to, every name. And they didn't go and ask these people. He just was able to recount his day so clearly, concisely, and consecutively that they're like, man, he couldn't have done it. He went to go visit his family, and he knows the train times. He knows these things. He knows. And apparently...
But who knows the train times?
Well, that's just...
who knows the street name?
Who pays that much attention to every person you talk... Because he was talking to strangers, but he remembered who they were.
He's overselling it.
He's overselling it. That's what I was saying. I was like, that's really, really bizarre. So at the very least, I was like, maybe he and Lizzie were in on it together.
Yeah.
In cahoots. Maybe they were in cahoots. Maybe he gets a kickback. Yeah, apparently he was in dire financial straits. The whole reason why he was in town was to hopefully make a deal with Lizzie's father, who was, a very wealthy man. So there's lots of things pointing to it. And I was like, okay, I'm open to the idea that maybe she wasn't alone. Although when it all came down to it, there were certain parts of like Bridget's story. Bridget says that she came in. She was washing the windows, and then she came in, and when she came in, she heard Lizzie laughing at the top of the stairs. The top of the stairs is where Abby's murder occurred. So Bridget puts Lizzie at the room where Abby was murdered, and now it's like, oh, okay. But Lizzie says she wasn't in the room in one story, and says, oh, yeah, she went to her room in another story. And then in another story, she was out in the barn. So again,
Wow. Where was she?
Where were you? What was going on, and why was this the way it went?
I find it so interesting when there's stories that have like two suspects that have so many holes in their alibis, or like just like both are so suspicious, and it's just like which one did it? They couldn't have both done it.
Super compelling.
Yeah.
Or they could have both done it.
Oh, they could have both done it?
Yeah. One got one.
But James did not benefit from the murders. And in classic, I watch a lot of crime dramas. Who benefits the most is probably your chief suspect, and Lizzie and her sister Emma, who was out of town. They benefited, definitely. So that's the story. I'm going in. I'm here. I'm soaking it in, and they talk about how when Lizzie was on trial, they wanted to convince everyone that she had inherited an illness, a mental illness, a violent mental illness. And the way they did this they were saying that on the same property that Lizzie Borden allegedly murdered her parents, her aunt, Eliza Borden, you got that, Eliza and Lizzie.
Oh, wow.
Eliza and Elizabeth. Eliza Borden threw her 3 small children into the cistern and then cut her own throat with a razor.
Into a well.
Into
a well.
Yes.
Oh, I thought you said her sister.
Cistern.
Okay. Yeah. I was like, what?
Threw her children into a well, and it was like 2 infants, basically, an infant and a toddler, and then an older child. The oldest child survived, but the other 2 drowned. And it's like, what? I've never heard of this. And they're like, oh, yeah, there's a room upstairs where we have toys because the children ghosts are still in this. And I'm like, that's my room. You don't tell me that right now. You wait until tomorrow morning.
That's what they know you want, though.
Yeah. Right, exactly.
You do want it.
They're like, this guy.
Let's put him in the toy room. Yeah. I'm like, oh, great. Thank you.
Yes.
But it was fascinating because even to me, that story is more horrifying in a lot of ways.
Oh, yeah.
Than the actual Lizzie Borden axe murders. It was a woman who threw her babies into a well and they drowned, and then she cut her own throat with a straight razor. Now, I have tried to do the blood brother thing, and we're going to be blood brothers.
You can't quite do it.
Yeah. It takes a lot of effort for me.
Yeah.
So the idea of dragging a straight razor across your throat is you really have to have a lot of commitment. It's not like drinking a ton of poison or throwing yourself off a building. When you throw yourself off a building, you have time to think, that was a bad idea, but it's over. That's it. Yeah. With the moment the knife touches your throat, there's time to stop. There's time to be like, no. So yeah.
Eliza was married into the family, right?
She married, and that was
making
actually
them not blood.
That's exactly what happened in the courtroom.
Okay.
They're like, she did not inherit this illness because Eliza was, married in to the Borden family. But that does speak to the land, that the land has some blood in it. The land is dark and strange and peculiar. And so, of course, the guides there play up this notion that there are children on the property. They also say that Eliza is on property, which is kind of eerie to think about because whatever postpartum and tragic events that led her to whatever happened there, that's just such a heavy feeling. And so they state that it's in the basement that most people experience Eliza, like she's in the basement. And I don't know, we've talked about basement ghosts before, and the concept of basement ghosts being people waiting for their retribution, being people who know they're dead and want to be punished or be dead. They don't want to stick around. They want it to be over. But there's also the argument that that's also where wells are. That's where the cistern was. Now, some stories state that the house that Eliza murdered her children and herself was actually right next door. But there's some confusion as to that.
Still super haunted,
area.
area.
It was all the same property.
Yeah,
it was all on the same
land.
property and possibly a shared well.
And I'd like to say that his full description of like the ghost hunt that he did there is on Patreon. So
yes, we were able to establish some incredible contact, and like I said, there was elements that made it such a very significant ghost hunt. And to the point at which I was like, "This is rigged. This has to be rigged." Yeah. It was so bizarre, but the fascinating thing is a lot of the elements that we always talk about how tragedy can spurn on ghosts, attention can spurn on ghosts, because the Lizzie Borden house was not a boarding house forever. It was just the house that people would stand in front of and go, "That's Lizzie Borden's house." Whoa. And ghost tours, people driving by, that was a common place for the longest time because it was the house of legend. It was the boogeyman's house. It was I dare you to knock on Lizzie Borden's door. I dare you to, stay the night in the house. That breeds a type of supernatural activity that, it's just very hard to replicate in any other way than all this focus, all this belief, all this dread and fear, plus hyper tragic action. Such a force of violence. And when you think of not just the death, but what it takes to repeatedly hit somebody with an axe.
It takes a lot of anger.
It takes a lot of anger. It takes a lot of rage. It takes a spike of emotion that you can't just write off as normal.
Yeah.
You have reached a point that is paranormal in a sense. It is above normal. It is outside the bounds of being normal. And that to me, again, unnatural, supernatural, those things are very closely related. It's an unnatural act.
Yeah, you have to have something in your head that's just off kilter in order to do that. Because like normal people like us, we couldn't muster that rage and the ability to hack someone to death unless in self-defense.
Well, and
even then we would be like, I think they're dead, I'm running away.
Even to kill somebody, they believe that Lizzie Borden's father died with the first hit.
Sure.
So the next 10 hits were just unloading. Mm-hmm. It's like shooting a person in the face 10 times. It's like it's not necessary. You are trying to expel something from your soul at that point. And intriguingly, we learned that they had never found the axe. They never found the murder weapon.
Do.
They found a handle that they were almost positive was the handle of the axe because it had hair and blood on it.
Sure.
Turned out that it was cattle hair and blood. Oh. And there was no head to the axe. So they didn't know, so that
ain't it.
That wasn't it.
No.
That ain't it. Did they check the well?
This is what's interesting.
Oh,
almost 100 years later, they found an axe on a neighbor's roof.
What?
Yes, and it was from the period. It was from the time. It was a brand new axe when it hit the roof, and they could tell this by the degradation of it. They were like, this was an axe that was brand new because there was no other markings of use, and they're like, we're almost positive this is the murder weapon.
That's got to be.
It's got to be the murder weapon.
And what they do with it?
Well, I think it's still being debated.
Sure.
Because it was out in the weather. It was out in the rain.
Well, sure, but
stuff.
they didn't put it in a glass case to show everybody.
No,
That's fun stuff right there.
I think it's actually evidence. I think it's
Yeah.
actually.
Oh God! The police ruin everything.
Well, it's the same way with the Gribble House murders. They never found the murder weapon.
Right.
The only incriminating evidence they found was the bloody cloths in the fireplace. But,
Right.
it's...
That was another thing. Apparently, while the house was on constant watch, Lizzie Borden burned a dress in the stove.
God.
And her friend was present when she did this. And Lizzie turns to her friend and says, it got paint on it, and shoves it in the stove. The police are right outside. And they kind of look and they see her.
Cooking a dress?
Yeah, throwing the dress in the fire. And it's like, That's suspicious. They also found a bucket of bloody cloth.
Yeah.
While they were investigating, and Lizzie Borden basically said, "Oh, it's my time of month." And the male police officers were like, "Oh,
she knows how to work the men boy.
She knew what she was doing." And I was like, "This is fascinating."
Stupid boys.
Stupid boys.
A police officer saw her down in the basement, like scrubbing something, and they were, and the guy's just like,
"So stupid."
Don't want to. No, woman stuff. Don't want to deal with it. And so it's so bizarre that she got it. That more scrutiny wasn't paid to any of it. And of course, the crime scene investigation was so far gone. It was not something, apparently, like even the photo that they used as the crime scene photo was taken like 9 hours after after the police arrived. They're all walking around poking the body and moving it. And like,
wow. So wait. So Lizzie Borden went free? Mm-hmm. And
lived the rest of her life.
Shut up.
Doing what she wanted.
Doing what she wanted.
Wow.
And she and her sister,
sucks.
Emma, lived in this big house on the hill.
Yeah.
And then at some point, Emma just stopped talking to Lizzie and moved out. And it's like, I wonder what that was about.
Yeah,
I wonder if Emma found something out that she didn't like and didn't want to sleep in a house with an axe murderer.
This is one of the crimes that misogyny really.
Oh no, misogyny defense is awesome.
Yeah.
You should try it, ladies. If you ever murder someone, just demand an all-male jury.
Fragile masculinity.
Wow.
Fragile masculinity at its finest.
And this is
no
why
woman could do it. You see that stroke? No, that's a man stroke.
Menstrual blood. I don't want to look at
This is why we need to normalize period talk.
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Because it's like if you see a bucket full of blood, that woman needs help. Yeah. She needs help.
That's wild.
Or if you just see a lady cooking a dress.
Yeah. If a lady just throws a dress in the fire and she was like, it's ruined. It's got, and what actually happened was the friend was then asked to verify that all the dresses in Lizzie's closet were present and accounted for. And she did. She said yes. But when she took the stand, she recanted and said she had lied. And she told the story of Lizzie. And Lizzie lost it on her. And I was like, well, of course she did.
Yeah.
That woman, and the woman was like, Lizzie told me not to tell. And I was like, well, of course she did. You know why? Because she's a murderer.
Yeah. Because she will hack you.
And you were her alibi. And now if she gets off.
She's like, watch out, snake.
I might have missed it. What happened to Eliza?
Eliza.
She left?
No.
Eliza slit her throat.
Oh, yeah, no. Eliza slit her throat. That's not that's
Lizzie?
not what I meant. No,
Emma?
No, Emma, thank you.
So Emma
not
was
Eliza.
her sister.
Crazy.
They lived together on the hill, and most people believe that because Lizzie Borden, when she moved to the hill, started throwing these lavish parties and hanging out with, get this, actors. And we all know how actors were viewed at that time. And so Emma was like, you're hanging out with a rabble. You were hanging out with low-class citizens. And so people think that was possibly what caused this division.
Sure.
But the fact that she moved out and never spoke to Lizzie again suggests that maybe there's something deeper at the root of it.
But do we know what happened to her?
No, she just moved away.
Oh, she just moved away?
She moved
and
lived out her life.
Okay.
Because, they were both
I didn't know
millionaires, of the time. And why they lived together was interesting, too. Because Lizzie Borden also, when I was growing up, I thought Lizzie Borden was in her late teens.
Yeah.
She was 32 years old.
Oh.
So she was living at home, 32 years old, not allowed to go to the parties all her life, not allowed to go out, not allowed to have the experience of the money that the family had.
Yeah.
And that created, I think enough resentment. And I think that like the moment that seemed to really change things was Abby being the stepmother. Abby's sister got into some trouble, so Andrew actually gave a property to the sister-in-law, and Lizzie went nuts. She could not believe it because it seemed like a huge betrayal. Why is this woman, who isn't really a part of our family, who is once removed from all of us, getting a piece of my inheritance? What is happening here? And so the father tried to placate Lizzie and Emma by giving them a property, but it turned out that the property, the rent that came into the property really didn't amount to any money because they had to keep putting it back into the property. So they found them, and it was work, and they did not like that. And so they were like, you don't want it. It's like, blah. And so the father bought it back from them, bought the property that he gave them back.
Oh my gosh.
At a trumped up charge to keep them happy. But they were sour, and they actually stopped calling Abby mom after this and called her, Abby, or my stepmother.
My stepmother.
Which was fascinating. Again, it looks bad for Lizzie Borden, and I would say that I am 90% certain Lizzie Borden acted alone and murdered her father and stepmother.
I don't think.
And
Uncle,
I have this 10% notion that maybe the uncle was involved. Because it's suspicious that he showed up the day before. It's suspicious that he.
Why would he show up? I mean, no, it's not even that. It's like, what does him showing up matter?
Oh no! If he did it, if he had a hand in it, like physically, like literally.
Oh, if he actually did the hacking,
right?
No, it's totally Lizzie.
Yeah, 100%. I'm pretty. I'm pretty.
A scorned woman
with that.
Can hack a dude. Okay,
well, that was another thing.
We all know that.
I don't think angry women, New Englanders of the 19th century.
There was that story. I love the story. It's not like a ghost story or anything, but it's like of the woman who lifts the car off of her child.
Of course. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, that's women.
That's adrenaline.
That is women.
Okay, but she wasn't like a teenager, like you said. She was a 32-year-old woman. Yeah. She's gonna have at least some muscle on her. I'm sure.
She's been training probably.
Oh, sure.
She's basically lived the life of a prisoner in a lot of ways.
Sure.
The family is pretty puritanical. She did not get to go out. She was not married off.
Wow.
There's a lot of pieces to this puzzle that suggest that this could have been a long time coming. This could have been, from the moment she first started missing out on what she saw as a life. You can't oppress a person without expecting an explosion.
Well,
run away.
No,
don't kill them.
No, because she wanted the money.
Don't forget, she didn't want to work.
Okay, yeah. So it's just I'm losing. What I'm doing is I'm losing the fact that like if I was in her situation, I would have ran away because I'm not a narcissist. But she's a narcissist. She wants the money. She's also greedy and she's about herself.
In the late 19th century, a woman running away doesn't have a lot of prospects.
No, yes, God.
You're also forgetting you're a white man.
Yeah, I can run away.
You can run away and
immediately get a job.
Yes.
Hi there,
land
boy.
on my feet.
You there? Work for me.
But also, it's the fact too that I'm sure she was looked down upon because she was a 32-year-old unmarried woman. She was a spinster.
She was a spinster.
So it's and those types of women back in that time, they were like, "Ew, what's wrong with you?"
And that's where a lot of other speculation came in. There was a lot of speculation as to maybe she was single because she didn't like men. Maybe there's a lot of play in those notions because she didn't marry. She didn't go on to marry, but she did live up. She lived the life that she really wanted, and that is highly indicative of doing something to get what you want. It's fascinating to say, if she killed them to get what she wanted, she definitely cashed in.
Yeah,
she had no remorse. She did not use that money to do anything. And I should say, she was very charitable. She had a huge pet foundation. She did all these things but they were her interest and her passion.
Sure.
They were not she was turning the money away because it was blood money or it was it was tragic. She didn't. The only time anyone ever saw her cry was when they said she was not guilty. Mm-hmm. At the not guilty plea, she burst out in tears, and it's like. Where were those tears when your father was dead in the living room?
Yeah,
and you can chalk some of that up to shock, but she was also kept in jail. She didn't cry in jail, or people didn't see her cry. They always said she was cool as she was cool as a cucumber.
Yeah,
she was always composed. She never showed any emotion. I was like, that's to a degree, good on you.
Sure.
But to another degree, it's like, that's kind of suspicious, don't you think?
I'm not going to lie. I'm having some conflicting feelings right now. I am slightly feeling bad for Lizzie Borden in like a little bit of a way because like, obviously I didn't grow up in like a super ultra conservative household, but like, I'd never put it in perspective, like the time, the fact that she was a woman. I guess like like you said, it's easy to say run away, like either now or as a white guy back then, because I'm kind of thinking about what I would do. But then I'm like, I guess she couldn't run away. If you run away, you're immediately. I mean, if you think the glass ceiling stick right now, it's bulletproof, right? But like back then.
Right. It was lead. It was a lead ceiling.
It's a lead ceiling. Can't even see through it.
Right, exactly.
Right. And so it's like interesting that
and that makes her kind of a counterculture icon in the sense of
that's wild.
What actions do you take to claim the life you want?
Sure.
And not endorsing it or saying that there's anything.
She did a great job.
But if the story is as it is, her plan worked to a T.
To a T.
And that does not make her a good person.
No.
That does not mean I approve of that action. But I can say, damn, that was impressive. That was a plan put to action and followed through, executed.
Yeah.
And then at the end, you're like, oh, because I am enthralled by the idea that there was a period of time when, and I want to say it was a period of time, but it's still where men have just a vast miscomprehension of women, a deep underestimation and a deep lack of comprehension.
That really worked in her favor.
Yeah,
and that worked in her favor. And I don't know that was her plan. I don't know that she was like, well, stupid men will never,
Sure.
I mean, I would. If I was her, I'd be like, stupid men.
Well, if anything, the fact that she was able to be like that big bucket of blood
Sure.
is because I'm, menstruating, is enough to turn a cop away. It's like, well, she knew that much. Like, sure. Unless, of course, it was, in fact, a very heavy day.
That's an ultra heavy day.
That's just it. It was like it was a bucket of bloody rags, just overflowing. You're like, no, I don't know. Because it was probably her dress. It was probably the dress that she set on fire was in the bucket.
Gotcha.
Is more than, and that's the speculation was, the cops even saw it, and when they questioned it, they're like, oh.
Yeah.
Like,
so why do you think she? I was thinking, why do you think she hacked her father in the face, but the mother in the back of the head? I mean, maybe opportunity, like an opportunistic thing. But so would there also be like a hatred type of thing?
Offensive.
Where you don't want maybe the mom was nicer and she wanted the mom to not see her coming, but she wanted the dad to like look her in the face as he did.
Maybe.
I think it's actually opportunity because.
Sure.
Most speculate that the mother was resetting the room from the uncle's stay.
Okay.
So she was in the guest room making the bed and got hit in the back of the head. Mm-hmm. Because she was facing away. And then the father was napping on the couch on his back. And so...
okay.
Yeah, he was asleep.
Gotcha.
Which, again, comes up to... Because there was a lot of weird... trying to get the toxicology, trying to figure out if they were poisoned, they did 2 autopsies. They did the autopsy in the dining room. The bodies were laid out, and then they did a second autopsy where they removed the heads of both of them so that they could send them off to get, and then at the trial, they pulled the heads out as evidence during the trial. And I'm like, okay.
They're not spiritual at all.
No.
Because the head is like, you can remove the head.
Yeah. It's like, oh, look upon these.
Right. It was like, look how terrible this is. And everybody's like, that's pretty terrible.
What year was this?
In the 1890s. Well, there's lots of pictures of the crime scene. Like at the Lizzie Borden house, you've got pictures that you can look at, and they are grotesque and graphic. And then they have the reconstructed skulls where you can see the damage to the skull. And it's interesting because they believed that it was more blunt force trauma than the edge of the hatchet. So it was like bludgeoning until they were dead, the cave-ins and everything. So it was just really a grotesque scene.
I think Lizzie Borden was a very meticulous individual.
I think so too.
Because just the fact that she would, when you said that she did charity work, you know what that sounded like to me? John Wayne Gacy, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Well, you know, it's interesting because she was like the Sunday school teacher. She did all these things before this event. She was a community
gotta save face.
Staple. I don't even think it was face. I think it was duty.
Sure.
She upheld her duty. But when the trial came out, the church turned their back on her. And that was a devastating blow because she's like, I have always been a part of this church. I've always given to this church. I continue to give to this church. And they're like, ew.
Not abnormal for churches.
No. Well, when once you're accused of
they're like,
of
we're
heinous
all
murder,
sinners, but not that sin.
But not you.
not that sin.
God will forgive you, but we're going to close the door.
Yeah.
It was the Puritans, you know.
God.
So anyway,
they suck.
But regardless, it's just like everything that it was stated just sounds like she was like very methodical of like how she planned this out. Because I think you're right. I think this was a long time coming. Also,
well, I do think that she was poisoning them too.
Oh yeah,
because they had a long rash of illness. But when Abby went in to talk to the doctor was like, your husband is notoriously cheap, notoriously stingy. What are you eating? And it turns out that they were eating rotten food. Well, they were literally eating, week-old fish and stuff like that. And I was like, of course you're sick.
Yeah.
So
imagine that too
her
is
poisoning him.
We don't
speculated.
know.
Yeah.
Because the doctor was like, what are you eating? It's like, oh, well, last night we had, this fish from last week. And it was like, oh, well, you don't have a refrigerator. You don't have, well, why are you still eating that? Because you're wealthy is another thing. It's like you're wealthy. You can get food. And they're like, he won't buy it. And so imagine that household too. Lizzie and Emma are both living in a house where they're eating food for weeks on end that had probably spoiled in the first week alone.
Sure.
And so, they're all sickly. They all have like regular illnesses. So when the mother shows up and says she's been poisoned, because she literally said, I've been poisoned.
Yeah.
The doctor was quick to be like, look, I know your family. I eat fresh food. Don't eat the rotten food. You're not poisoned. He dismissed it. But the interesting thing was, if they've always been eating this rotten food, how is she differentiating the sickness that she's had before from suddenly being like, I've been poisoned? And that was like a week before the axe murder.
So my other question is, do we know Abby's age?
Yes, she was like 67 at the time of the murder.
Okay, because I was going to ask if she was around Lizzie's age, because that's enough. Well, because
what's interesting is Lizzie kind of grew up with Abby. I mean, Lizzie spent a good portion of her life because her mother died when she was young, and Abby came in shortly thereafter. So Lizzie had more time with Abby than with her mother.
Gotcha.
And for a while, Lizzie and Emma referred to Abby as mother, but then started calling her Miss Borden, also started calling her Abby.
Okay.
There was a point at which they severed their relationship as mother and child and began to look at her as competition.
I have a question about the poison thing. You said she went to go buy cyanide?
Yep.
Where do you buy cyanide?
Pharmacy.
Why would you? Why?
She went to the pharmacy.
That?
So there are lots of
pharmacy
household reasons to have cyanide. Primarily murdering your family. No, I'm kidding.
Okay.
The concept is it could have been for pest control. It could have been for
pest control.
Yeah, to kill a rat.
They used all sorts of things.
Cyanide to kill a rat?
We use strychnine
It
now.
was the 1800s. I mean, they used they put lead in their paint.
Yeah.
I mean, they were not.
So cyanide was not an abnormal purchase necessarily.
And why was she denied that then if it's so normal?
Because it is abnormal enough.
Okay.
because it was enough to be like, I don't think we want to give you this. And we don't have a full story on that. We just know that it occurred.
Yeah.
Where the pharmacist literally was like, no.
Okay.
It's also
And oddly enough, during our ghost hunt, the word pharmacist came up and the word medicine came up.
Yeah.
And in that wheel, it was like pharmacist, medicine, keep them here. We're all very close to each other. And you're like, was the medicine meant to keep them here?
Yeah.
Because it's possible that there might be doses of cyanide at the time that you were using to cure things. I don't know. You know, I am not up on my cyanide history. I know you shouldn't take it. If someone offers you cyanide, don't take it.
But, you know, like the thing is, too, she could have been getting her cyanide from elsewhere also
That's
afterwards because there were plenty of underground apothecaries back then that were, you know, happy to dispense women poison because they wanted to get away from abusive husbands.
There is
and
this concept like that if she was doing the long poison, like small dosages that hopefully will accumulate to their death, it's possible that she was getting frustrated with the length of time it was taking.
Sure.
You know, who knows how long she'd been doing it. If she was poisoning them, she may have been like, I don't want to just poison them so they fall over dead.
Yeah.
But by doing it bit by bit, maybe they would die staggered, maybe, you know.
Sure.
But when they haven't died after a while, it possibly through
and they're complaining about it.
And they're complaining about it.
We got to do something quick.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like she just told the doctor that she was poisoned.
Yeah.
The axe will be quick. You know.
Yeah. There was,
if that's, and, you know, we can speculate all day long.
Yeah. Well, because there were ways that you could do that. Like a popular way was through eggs. You would go and get a dozen eggs, but one of the eggs would have poison in it, and you would feed that egg to whoever you were trying to poison regularly, because people ate eggs every morning, you know, and nobody would know the difference.
That's a real chicken way to do it.
Boo.
Boo. Exiled.
How dare you, sir?
But, you know, I'm just saying, it is not out of the realm of possibility that that could have been a thing. But it sounded like Lizzie had like a lot of resentment. And so
I think so. And it's funny because there were people at the Lizzie Borden house who firmly believed that she didn't do it. Who were in the camp that it was James Morse, the uncle, or a random happenstance, which seems absolutely impossible. As a matter of fact, there was a point at which the front door was locked from the inside. When Bridget was coming in and out, she was like, it was locked, and it's never locked. She just came through the door, so she didn't understand why it was locked. So there's all kinds of weird little bits, but I cannot believe that a person went on a murder trial. Their alibi was, I was in the house while the murders happened and didn't hear, see, or sense anything.
Yep.
I might have been in this room. I was possibly in that room, but really I was just moving around where everyone was being murdered. I mean, it's like Three Stooges level of she walked out of one room and an axe murderer murdered her father as she passed. Is like that.
Like who's on first?
Right. Yeah. Well, and worth noting, Abby was like 200 pounds.
Oh.
So Lizzie said she was in the dining room ironing handkerchiefs. The dining room is kind of under the guest room where a 200-pound woman in a pre-Victorian house falls.
Yeah.
When I sat down, you could hear it. On the other side, the whole house couldn't shake with a footfall. You're telling me that she didn't notice that a 200-pound woman hit the ground and was repeatedly bludgeoned.
No, 19 times.
19 times.
There's just no way.
Yeah,
there's just no way.
Okay.
So I really, there's a lot of Lizzie Borden podcast episodes out there. And I wanted this to be different. And I feel like so far, it has been, but I think the main thing that's going to make it different is if we play a little episode of From One to Wicked with Chris. And what I mean by that, for those of y'all who who are new to the podcast, we do episodes called From One to Wicked, which are just basically like a game that we play where Madison tells me a story and we rate a haunting from 1 to wicked. Now, Madison and I can't do that because we haven't stayed in the house, but Chris, you can do that. from one being, I mean, just not wicked at all. I get up like Madison, like your lighthouse story where the ghost gives the person a hug after they reach the top of the steps because they're like, thanks for coming to see me. That's one. And then we got with Bloody McKenzie being a 9, borderline 10, probably should be a 10.
Yeah.
You know, from 1 to wicked, how haunted is the Lizzie Borden house?
Wicked. Absolutely.
Wicked?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well,
is it like, I mean, you're saying like 10 or are you
10.
saying like 10?
10.
10.
It's
Wow.
a 10.
We got a 10.
It's a 10 because through the course of the evening, we had such specific and impressive evidence, very interactive evidence, but more than anything else was the compliance of all of this energy. It was very much, there was a whole session, we were using the Estes method. If you're not familiar with the Estes method, it was originated in Estes Park in like 2016. But it's basically where you isolate a person with a spirit box on headphones so they cannot be influenced by questions. So you're asking questions in one room and the person with the headset is just saying whatever's coming through the spirit box. And this was a fascinating spirit box session. There was so many things that were just incongruous, but they all started to meld and sew together. So I have been on a lot of ghost hunts, and I have seen a lot of spot evidence and moments that were very intense. But this was a sustained and very complex and complete series of communications that lasted well over an hour.
Sure.
Wow.
And that to me gave me this notion that, okay, whatever's here is very communicative, is very aware.
Yeah.
And also very interested in us. When we shifted around, it knew by number who was in what room and who was in another room.
Wow.
And it was very bizarre because we were using a variety of tools, and the tools were complementary to each other.
Sure.
Which is not normal. You know, if you've got a spirit box over here and a REM pod over there and a light over there and you're using a ghost app, oftentimes you start to lean towards one or the other, but this was an even spread all around.
Okay. And by the time you are listening to this, if you're not a Parajunkie, that episode will be up on Patreon as a Patreon exclusive, where it's just Chris kind of like really going into detail about that haunting.
Also, we turned on the GhostTube app and we got some crazy things.
Well, they don't know about the GhostTube app.
Yeah, that's true.
But
You don't know about the GhostTube app, and I do not endorse apps on phones often, but I find that the GhostTube app was so well calibrated for this experience. Mm-hmm. And I have since been using it in spot locations here at the Underground and gotten really interesting results that I feel are worth telling people that the GhostTube app is a very useful addition to your ghost hunt equipment.
Definitely.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, and definitely, and they even say it when you open the app for the first time, always fact check what you're getting because you can't take it at face value necessarily. But I will say, some of the things that I picked up in here from it, and then also at my own house, very interesting.
Yeah.
So
we talk about the GhostTube app in that episode too.
Yeah. So
and we'll probably do a breakdown on equipment and apps and things that we would use in ghost hunts. I think we have a couple of ghost hunts coming up soon. So
yeah, we do. So all ghost hunts, we'll probably put snippets out for the public, but all ghost hunts will be Parajunkie content. Yep. All ghost hunts will be that, and also we got the series coming up. So we got some like seriously good stuff coming up for Parajunkies. So it's
so definitely, if you're sitting on the fence of the Patreon, you should definitely check it out.
Join us.
Yeah,
we have a good time. We post literally every day. I mean, we're putting something new out. We try to put something new out like every single day on our Patreon. We just Madison last night. We were just walking our mutts us. And we stopped in Wright Square, and Madison's like, let's talk about, let's show the Parajunkies like the issues with what happened to Tomochichi's grave.
Yeah. He got a rock.
And he got a rock, a non-native rock for a Native American, as you like to put it.
Well, I was like, that's the biggest
we talked a little bit about
BS.
that.
I always call him the Charlie Brown of historical figures because, it's like, I got an obelisk, I got a statue, I got a rock.
I got a rock.
Yeah, it's not even an oppressive rock. It really
is.
Like,
yeah, I've seen better rocks, okay?
Yeah.
Oh, I've seen many
in
better
Savannah, rocks are hard to come by. I will say that. Which is weird because why would you memorialize someone with something that you can't find here? It's like, this'll make people think Savannah, big piece of granite.
Literally. But, well, we can get into that in a whole different episode. But, yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed listening to Lizzie Borden. I know she's...
This was a fun one.
Yeah, it was fun. I know she's not from Savannah, so it's always fun to talk about.
Shot here, though.
Yes, the film was shot here. Yeah. It's terrible, but it's
it's so bad.
They made Chloe Sevigny and Kristen Stewart.
They try to make.
Although Chloe Sevigny fell in love with Savannah making that movie and has since come back with 2 series.
Yep.
The Act and The Girl from Plainville. Both Chloe Sevigny produced.
Really? Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, people fall in love with this place. It's a great place. The bomb.
Yeah, they filmed like this scene with chickens or whatever in the Moon River Brewing Company basement. I'm like, this is just weird, y'all.
I actually want to see it. I watched the first 5 minutes. I was like, oh my God, it's so bad. I stopped, but
I think they
have to watch it.
Decided to play up the relationship between Bridget, the maid, and Lizzie Borden.
They did.
But history tells us that it was pretty contentious. Although Bridget, worth noting, on her deathbed, said she lied to protect Lizzie and then died. And no one knows what she lied about, and no one knows what she saw or what she knew.
Goodness gracious.
But on her deathbed, she's like, I lied about Lizzie.
Oh my God,
that's so dramatic.
It's so dramatic.
What a cliffhanger.
What a cliffhanger.
Why,
Bridget? Right. Why didn't you write a diary?
Absolutely. Well, maybe one day somebody will be able to get in contact with Bridget. Who knows? But we're going to go ahead and wrap things up. So thank you guys so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Actually, Chris, I have a ghost tip.
Yay! Let's give Chris a break on the ghost tips, and let's have a ghost tip from Madison.
Yes. So do not put welcome mats in front of your house. If you're going to put a mat in front of your house, have it be something simple, like a nice design or, just like Happy Halloween or whatever it is. When you put welcome on your mat, you're inviting spirits into your house. And you're unknowingly doing so. So
that is literally what the word welcome means.
Yes.
It means enter.
Yeah.
Be well.
Exactly.
Yes,
so,
absolutely.
Don't use welcome mats. Not saying don't wipe your feet on a mat, just maybe put a nice mushroom on it or something,
Or scram.
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 Yes. But that's my ghost tip.
Excellent ghost tip.
Yep. All right. Well, with that, my name is Madison Timmons.
I'm Chris Soucy.
And stay spooky, y'all.